Are you telling me we have actual Xenoblade Chronicles news to cover, and it's not a Nintendo Direct? What kind of wizardry is this? Well, Takahashi's given us a little bit of a clue as to the future of Xenoblade Chronicles, thanks to a note he left in the limited edition soundtrack for Xenoblade Chronicles 3, translated by Mira over on Nintendo... My Nintendo News, sorry. I'll leave a link in the description down below to the Nintendo Life article about this. Takahashi talks about the soundtrack overall, but eventually leads into a translated part on Nintendo Life's webpage that I'll read out for you right here. Rather than playing on defense, going on the offense, change rather than maintain. Bear in mind, this was translated from Japanese, so this is a stance that I have continued to hold for 30 years. If there is another Xenoblade, it will likely be something vastly different from what came before. In style and in music, I would like to make my next goal something that will betray everyone's expectations in a good way. Well, few things here. It's kind of packed with a lot of information with little words. Change rather than maintain. What that says to me is that nothing is sacred, everything is up to subject to be changed, everything is up to be interpreted, and everything is up to have new storylines in the future. If there is another Xenoblade, again it will likely be something vastly different from what came before in style and in music. Now, it makes sense he talked about the music here, because this note or letter or whatever came in the limited edition soundtrack box. And I wouldn't be surprised if the music overall is different in the future. I wouldn't even be surprised if we see a direction more akin to, say, Xenoblade X, going into the future, at least with more vocal songs and just songs with lyrics overall. It's one of the things I really treasured about X's soundtrack as someone who really likes songs that have vocals in them. They tend to grab me more than just compositions and orchestrals. But also in terms of style. Now, here's the thing. You can go find the numbers for yourself, but look up the sales numbers for all the Xenoblade games, and you'll notice that Xenoblade 2 is like dominating. Now, there's a lot of aspects to that went into that number, I think. You have to remember the time that Xenoblade 2 came out in. Xenoblade 2 came out in December of 2017. The Switch had only come out earlier that year. And remember back to 2017 if you can. There weren't a lot of Switch games. This was one of the key discussion points about the Nintendo Switch in those early days. There was just not much to play on it. Xenoblade 2, being a massive RPG that can easily run you hundreds of hours, while also sporting a very anime art style, with characters that, let's admit, have sex appeal, Xenoblade 2 kind of had all the stars aligned for it, and every time Xenoblade is brought up in the news, it just seemingly never fades. Sure, a lot of discourse has raged over the years about the quality of Xenoblade 2, but its sales figures speak for itself. It's the highest selling Xeno game of all time, and by no small margin. Xenoblade 3 may catch up, but it hasn't yet at least. And I've kind of held this opinion for a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised if the art direction they take for Xenoblade 4 is closer to Xenoblade 2. Like, Xenoblade 3's art direction, right, was a bit of a middle ground between Xenoblade 1 and 2, but if you ask me personally, I would say it had one step closer to Xenoblade 1 than it did for 2. I think the opposite may be the case for Xenoblade 4, where it will be one step closer to Xenoblade 2 than it is to Xenoblade 1. And I've talked about this before, but I also think Xenoblade 4 needs to mix up quite a few things when it comes to the overall formula of the Xenoblade game, especially when it comes to the gameplay formula. I think tutorials need a complete revision. I think the game needs some fresh new aesthetics alongside it. Not just retooling what came before, but creating something new and new imagery. Because let's face it, yes, it works for Xenoblade 3, but the main visual of Xenoblade 3 is the Orion Titan and the Mechonis Sword. Those are visuals we more attached to Xenoblade 1 and 2 than to 3, which can create this subtle feeling across the player base that Xenoblade 3 is less unique than 1 and 2. When it comes to the music overall, I think there's a few things they can learn from Xenoblade 3, and he even talks about in the letter about how people love the Weight of Life, but it's only used twice in Xenoblade 3, and Takahashi, to paraphrase, said, well, it only really fit in 2 places. He only wanted to use the song where it fit and not just kind of like shoehorn it into different scenes just to say we could play the song more. And I agree with that decision, but you could also argue that's a problem with the pacing of Xenoblade 3 because there weren't enough like high-octane moments to justify using Weight of Life a few more times. But when it comes to the music of Xenoblade 4, I would not be surprised if they take a step closer to more rock. or fast-paced music, or at least take more inspiration from Xenoblade X. I've been a bit of an advocate for this, where if you look at Xenoblade 3, and you look at Xenoblade 3 Future Redeemed, in almost every aspect of both of those games, you can see them leaning more into X's formula and X's design philosophies than in 1 or 2. Like, in 3 and Future Redeemed, they're both trying out different aspects of the X formula, and just seeing which ones stick and which ones don't. Like, when it comes to the affinity point system, the map design, the visuals, the aesthetics, heck, even the class design and class progression. They're leaning more into X overall when it comes to all those gameplay systems. And you could even argue story-wise when it comes to a certain degree, at least. And while Takahashi was kind of vague here with this message, you have to remember the message he also said a couple of years ago, or I think it was like last year, dang. Again, link in the description down below, but I've talked about this before, where he sent out that email to the Japanese players, where he said, while it is a conclusion, that does not mean it is the end of the Xenoblade series. Talking about Xenoblade 3 and Future Redeemed here. It is just a stopping point in my mind. I think that everyone who played this title and the additional stories in the expansion pass can imagine what lies in the future for Xenoblade. He says it right there. If you pay attention to Xenoblade 3 and Future Redeemed, you can kind of have an idea as to where the series is going to go from here. And he may be talking about gameplay-wise, aesthetically, musically, or even just story-wise. And I think he's talking about a little bit of everything. I really do think I'm kind of on the money with this prediction that they want to lean, at least Takahashi wants to lean more into Xenoblade X. I would not be surprised if one of the launch or like the yearly launch titles for the next Nintendo console is the Xenoblade X Definitive Edition. From what I hear, that game can scale very well when it comes to giving it more power to run on, so I can't imagine porting it would be that much of a hassle. And having another Xenoblade title with a whole bunch of things that are easily marketable, like giant mechs, Elma's story, the music, you can advertise all of that for Xenoblade X Definitive Edition, have that as a launch title for the next console, and you have something Xenoblade related to kind of give it that Xenoblade 2 effect, where there's not much going to be that's probably going to be on the next console for a year or two. Have a Xenoblade title to be there so that people who want to just have something to play can go play that game, and then they become Xenoblade fans. This happened with Xenoblade 2. And yes, I know he says if there is another Xenoblade in the recent blurb thing, let's be honest here, there's going to be another Xenoblade game. It's selling pretty well, and it's only gaining in popularity in a lot of ways. Like, yes, Xenoblade 3 has not passed Xenoblade 2 in terms of sales, but Xenoblade 2 is still selling. And more people are becoming cognizant of Xenoblade as a whole. So when it comes to Xenoblade 4, I would not be surprised if we take a step backwards in terms of, not backwards, but a step closer to Xenoblade 2 in terms of art direction or character design. Not fully, but at least trending in that direction, right? And having a gameplay loop and world exploration more akin to Xenoblade X, maybe. I do hope, though, that we get the appearance system from Xenoblade 1 Definitive Edition. I still think that's by far the best appearance system that Xenoblade has ever had. And you would be surprised how easily you can market just a character creator. Or not even a character creator, just like customizing characters, like change their shirts or shoes or pants, whatever. A lot of people eat that stuff up. You can also easily reward side content by just unlocking additional new, like, appearance stuff from it. And then the final sentence, not necessarily sentence, but you know what I mean. At least clause. I would like to make my next goal something that will betray everyone's expectations in a good way. If you have followed my Xenoblade content for a while now, you'll know that I talk about this a lot, and that is the idea that Takahashi and Xenoblade overall loves to play on your expectations and usurp them in a lot of ways. Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3 all do this in their own unique ways, and all in their own different styles. Xenoblade 4 to me would not be any different from that, so that line alone feels more Xenoblade than everything else. Just because betraying players' expectations in a good way tends to be the core of what makes a Xenoblade game. Yeah, I think Xenoblade's future overall is very bright. They now have 3 numbered games to work off of, as well as a spin-off with X. To look at the data, look at the public reception and perception, at all of these features, all these story beats, all these characters and everything, they can look at all that and use that as data to formulate what they want to do for Xenoblade 4 and to make it an even better game. The ball is completely in their court right now, and I think Xenoblade is in a prime position to absolutely jump up in terms of popularity. Excluding X, 1, 2, and 3 are all very accessible to a modern audience. The story is great, all the games do feel completely different to one another in their own unique ways, and I think that's also one of the aspects of Xenoblade that I do treasure the most, is that each game kind of has its own thing going on. We do have that old IP they announced from Monolith from like 2016 or something that just has nothing about it released since. Like, it's just been up in the wild. Like, I haven't heard anything about it. Like, yeah, you can go look that up, by the way. It's like a high fantasy open world RPG or something like that. We got a few screenshots, I think, but we just have not really got anything about it. So maybe that's coming down the pipeline, maybe? Who knows? It's also possible that internal projects just get scrapped over time because either they have to reallocate resources or just for whatever reason things just don't pan out. And, you know, it happens. But I feel like Monolith's reputation, and Takahashi's as well, has never been better. They're in a prime position to really take hold of the industry here. I don't expect Xenoblade to ever be as popular as, say, like Mario or Zelda, but I also don't think it has to be. I really don't. But it still has potential to absolutely skyrocket in terms of popularity, because it can learn from all that came before and make itself an even better experience. And I think if they're able to make some key decisions when it comes to the gameplay loop and the overall combat of the game going into the future, and the progression system, really hone in on those elements, while keeping the level of story they're able to convey, I think they're in a great spot. I really do. And I think leaning into X overall, including in terms of music and gameplay and progression and world design and exploration and side content and all that, lean into X some more. Take the right lessons from X. There's a lot of wrong ones you can also take. Take the right lessons from X, and I think they're golden. So I'm going to call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe. Have a great day. Go play some video games if you can, and as always, I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Till we meet again.